Welcome to the Bright Insight podcast. This is a weekly show provided by Brightside Security Lab. We're talking about updates on security regulations, requirements, and perspectives on the current cybersecurity developments. Security is becoming more widely used and important at home, work, school, or in your personal life. Think about GDPR and the Cybersecurity Act. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. The more systems we secure, the more secure we all are. Thank you for listening to Bright Insight.
Let me introduce Anand. He's a product marketing manager for the MCU 32 microcontrollers in Microchip, and he's with us today from Arizona. Anand, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Hi, Carlos. Thanks for having me here. Yes, I've been with Microchip for almost 6.5 years now. I have a little bit of a dual role here. One is I am a product manager. I do lifecycle managements of products, 32-bit microcontroller products. But the other hat that I wear, which is of more relevant to our conversation here, is that I'm the marketer for the security market segment as it applies to our 32-bit microcontrollers, which means, yes, trying to develop our security ecosystem, meet with customers, talking about their security needs, and also work with partners like yourself for developing security certification and other things that help with the overall security ecosystem for our products. So that's what I do at Microchip. Thanks,
Anand. And one of the things I guess we didn't talk in the past, because we haven't talked in previous occasions about so many things. The MCUs, they are something that's very close to me. I'm an electronics engineer, so I used to work a lot with MCUs, with embedded systems, and I'm very fond of these kind of devices. And one of the things that I always think when I think on companies like Microchip who produce that kind of components is those devices are used everywhere. They're used in multiple kind of applications. And I always wonder how much visibility do you have when you produce one of those components? Because of course, I can imagine at the beginning when you are on this design phase, you already foresee some applications, but how many of those applications are unforeseen? How many of those applications are something that is really up to the developer? How much visibility you have at that stage with regards to what will be the applications or uses for those MCUs?
Yeah, that's a very remarkable statement that you have here, and it's always, I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it's always a surprise for us. We develop a microcontroller with certain peripherals, certain things that we have in mind, thinking about a specific market, market segment or targeted markets. But then we feel, and our customers surprise us every time by taking it into use cases and markets that we never envisioned. So the predictability of having a generic microcontroller going into one specific or targeted for one specific market segment is actually pretty low. In fact, it's generically used, and even in one market, industrial, for example, it can be used in multiple different places and things like that. So you are right there.
And then here we're talking about in general all the specifications and features, but when it comes to security, is there any expectation with regards of the security from the developer's perspective? Or is really, again, the developers will adopt it for different use cases and work with the specifications as they come?
You are absolutely right in the sense that there isn't a generic expectation of security when a microcontroller comes out, right? It's more targeted towards the end application and the use case that it goes into, right? So for example, if a microcontroller goes into, let's say, a payment space, yes, you would expect there's some level of security, but then the standards and other things take it to a payment market, right? And then if the same microcontroller is used towards an industrial end segment or an automotive end segment, the expectation of security is very different in that case. So it just depends on the end use case. And that's what I think you alluded to even in your question earlier.
And I guess from the point where you are, microchip is with the components, it's still a very long way on the value chain, right, to the end device. There will be several layers, different kind of developers, and I think each of them will have also their own vision about the requirements and the use cases as they get closer to the end product.
Absolutely. You're right. It basically adds layers from taking, a microcontroller and getting it to the end application. The vision of security and expectations keep basically progressing, right? Keep getting added towards that end chain. But what we have to do from a microcontroller perspective is to provide that ecosystem where they not only use our microcontrollers, but also maybe some firmware or some kind of like a Lego block, right? Where they want to basically take some expectations, and are we providing those things where they can just take that and slowly build towards their end goal. So that's kind of the play that we would have to have from a microcontroller perspective.
You use the magic word ecosystem, because one of the things I have in mind is when you're developing an MCU, a secure MCU that wants to address and wants to help developers to manage their technical and business needs, you need to work in collaboration, right? So you need to work with that ecosystem.
Absolutely, right? Because it's kind of like you take a microcontroller. There is absolutely, gone are the days where you and I were sitting in a microcontroller class and start putting opcodes in, and you call those barebone programming, right? So that's all gone now, right? So people want a microcontroller, and they would say, okay, let's say for example, they are developing a secure thermometer that is connected, right? They want to talk to the cloud. They are asking for, hey, can your microcontroller do this? But then also build me that environment where it's already having all the pieces that you need for me to start quickly programming, whether it's a Bluetooth communication or all the other things. They want that ecosystem all available so that they can just plug and play and start developing an application as quickly as possible.
And probably that's also calling for a different kind of accessibility to the devices and the functionality of the devices, right? So this is not anymore the developer who wants to know what bit I need to change to get that functionality. Is much more into, tell me what API I need to use. It's a different kind of conversation.
Absolutely. And they want, by using the API, essentially what they want is they don't want to pour over 2,000 sheets of a data sheet. If you've seen a microcontroller data sheet now, it's like 2,000 pages. For them to actually go and figure out what every bit is and register is, it takes time. I'm not saying it's not a relevant exercise, but what they're looking for is, give me an API, give me a function that I can use that can automatically do this for me. Give me a development, an IDE that can take care of these configuration settings automatically so that I can focus on the thing that is most important to me. Should I develop a graphical user interface? Then I'm focusing on that function that I'm developing using the APIs that you will give to me, right? So that's the need for the hour right now.
And I have the impression that with security will be the same, right? So for the developer, they may find a requirement that says you need to use secure communication, and then they will look for the API for secure communication or encryption or any other security related function. Is that the case?
It is. It is. It's absolutely the case. And it depends on, and I'm going to talk about the generic customer, right? I'm not going to talk about the customer who is a security expert who just can do everything on their own. Because right now, security, I would say, is still evolving, right? When we talk to some of our customers, they are still trying to get their arms wrapped around, their brains wrapped around the need for security and what they need to do. So for us to actually encourage them to think about security and to add security is half the battle won, because now they know what security needs are. But now it's the 2000 sheet data sheet conversation that we talked about, because okay, now I know what I need to do for me to add security. But then if I have to go program everything on my own, it's going to take a lot of time and effort, and it is taking me away from my core competency, which is developing an app or doing other things. So for us to be able to give everything wrapped in an API saying use this to do secure boot will make a time to market thing is a time to market factor for our customers, and the relevance will be super important for them, right? So the APIs, the need for putting it into a package saying use this to do secure boot or anything to make their life easy when it comes to developing security is going to go a long way. So that's why I think having a trusted execution environment or a software based security solutions and APIs is getting key and getting more and more relevant for our customers.
Now, you are touching in a very interesting subject, which is the maturity of the developers, because we see all kind of maturities, but probably in the emerging markets and the IoT domain, we see higher expectations to the functionality of the device. So the developer doesn't need to be an expert in security, right?
The expectation or the requirement for security is based on, from a microcontroller perspective or from a silicon vendor perspective, the expectation for knowing a lot about security requirements, in my mind, has to be focused on the developer, right? So I use this secure thermometer or other things as an example. The person who develops the secure thermometer, the app, has to know a lot about security to exactly figure out what that application needs to develop, to what application to basically understand what they need to develop their application, what security is needed, what are the threat levels that they need to be thinking about. But if there's a generic user that's on the market who's buying the secure thermometer, they don't need to know about security. As long as they understand that security is going to be taken care of in like a sticker or something that says, hey, this is a secure thermometer, it's going to take care of all kinds of attacks. That's all they are looking for. So the education of security needs to be on the developers, and the ecosystem needs to be focused on that.
Now, one of the things that I feel sometimes we underestimate is that while we keep talking about devices, we already live in a service-oriented economy. This is very much driven by by service providers. And I guess a lot of things that you describe right now applied also to service providers, right? So service providers, they bring the services, and same thing, they don't need to be experts in security in order to provide quality of service. They just need to rely on the devices, and the device will rely also in the core capabilities from the silicon.
Absolutely. And I think that's where I'm basically trying to say that I would consider service providers are, I think the granularity of security understanding or the requirement for security starts to fade from the service provider perspective, if you use my example, right? And then the person who is actually going to be using the service provider for doing any services, they don't again need to understand the security. As long as the service provider understands that all the security requirements for that application has been met by the person or by the company that's providing inputs to the service provider, they should be fine. That's kind of my perception of security expertise or the ability to understand the highest level of security.
And I agree. I think that's a great example, because that very much summarizes the value, the benefit of the security functionality at the silicon level for all the value chain, all the ways to service providers and end users, and also the need to simplify the effort to understand the security functionality that comes from the devices. We don't need to have more security experts. Of course, we should have more. We have enough, but we cannot expect that every single developer or every single provider builds that security expertise. They can easily rely on the security that is provided by the silicon.
Absolutely, because I think we touched upon this, right? We are right now, everything is getting so overwhelming with all this explosion of connectivity, AI, ML, everything happening, that it is hard enough for us to focus on our core competency and fight with our competition, to be able to add multiple levels and things because of all the ecosystem changes that are happening might be a huge challenge. So that way, as long as we wrap security needs and other things into a neat little wrapper and say all the security needs for this use case has been taken care of and a check mark, I think people are going to be happy, right? And so is the case in other use cases as well. As long as we have something that says, hey, all these security needs are going to be taken care of, don't worry, and we hand it off to a service provider or an end customer, they should be happy, right? And I think that's the way I think it should work. As long as it's not, we should make it as easy as possible for people to just absorb security and make it a part of their live stream. This is the best way to do it.
That's the best way we can implement it, when we don't need to worry about that. We don't need to think about it.
When you develop a coffee maker, you basically have to write down what are the different threat levels and other things that a coffee maker can actually be subjected to, right? And if it's a smart coffee maker, right, you just talked about this, and somebody can access it, then what you can potentially do is to make sure that you protect it against all the remote attack possibilities. Because as you rightly said, this coffee maker can live inside a person's home, or it can be taken into a power plant, right? So as long as you focus on what you think are appropriate threat models and you focus against protecting that, you should be good, I feel, from an appliance maker in this example, right? At the end of the day, a smart coffee maker, if somebody's using a remote attack to hack into it, whether it sits in and you have all the protections against it, it really doesn't matter whether it sits inside a home or it sits inside a power station, because for all kinds of attack possibilities, now you have blocked it out. That's kind of the goal here. that we are trying to accomplish, right? But if somebody is trying to, and so in my case, in this example that you gave me, the smart coffee maker, as long as it protects it against all remote attack possibilities, you should be good. But if somebody is close enough and trying to hack into that coffee maker using some kind of a physical attack or some perturbation or something like that, then that's a different story, right? So then you basically have not thought about it as a threat model, and maybe you didn't even want to protect it against that kind of a threat model, because there is always the level of security that you want for your product. And as long as you meet that, you should be good.
Well, once in a while, I have the cynical ones asking me, for example, if you do a security evaluation, doesn't mean the product is secure. Or if you certify, that means it's secure. Or if you use a particular secure component, the product is secure. And I call it cynical minds, because the answer is no. I think security is something that is something very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to say something is secure. If anything, what we do is we manage the risk, right? So we try to foresee what will be the potential problems. So our threat modeling, we come with potential countermeasures to mitigate that risk. And we do this from a risk mitigation point of view, which will be also the other extreme, right? That when there is no assumption of risk and then there are no countermeasures, well, you can be sure that product is not secure. I cannot tell you about what is secure, but I can tell you what is not secure.
Yeah, I think you're right. When we try to think about security and we talked about threat models, we think about what are the expected and intended use cases for that product, right? And we try to manage risk at that level. But then you are absolutely right. You can always find multiple ways to do it, and we do the best we can when we provide, and that's why we call it as a security assurance. We don't say a security guarantee, because there is a difference between assurance and a guarantee in many ways. So that's how I when I talk to customers, I basically say assurance is what we can offer. We cannot guarantee anything.
Thanks, Anand. Thank you very much for all the insights. Great talking with you.
Thank you for listening to Bright Insight. In the next episodes, we will cover different topics, such as the EU Cybersecurity Act, the business case of security evaluations, common criteria, SASIP, IoT, and software-based security. Stay tuned and subscribe on brightside.com.